All right. So welcome. It's Tuesday, right? Don't have any snappy video to get you going, but you already got that downstairs. So the session says with securing a virtualized environment. Honestly, what I've got in the deck is a lot more about. It's probably a bit more about compliance. It's really more about change control than anything else. And at the end, we'll have some additional. I'll apologize if they're a little bit VMware specific. We can spin it all. It doesn't. We're not going to, we can leave product names out of it. But the processes are the important thing here. And I do work for a VMware partner, and that's mostly what I do. So that's how you get it. So my name is Dennis Bray. I'm an architect. I have the CTO title at ENS. I see a lot of customers, a lot of people's faces I recognize out there. So hopefully this turns out to be a good thing. I would encourage you to ask questions. So as you go along, ask questions. So let's go ahead and let's get into it here. So the agenda, probably the top half of this is where we're going to spend most of the time. Compliance for virtualized and cloud environments, patch management, software provisioning. But it's going to be mostly about, so in my mind, one of the things that happens, people approach virtualization, and even if they didn't intend to, they really build a much larger estate than they planned on. Right? The barriers to creating new systems are much lower with virtual. So a lot of times, operations that could keep a good handle on their existing infrastructure, when it turns over to virtual infrastructure, it's just too easy to create new systems. And as we get more and more systems, we get more and more opportunities for uniqueness, right? And a lot of our problems around exploits or security or things that are relatively easy for us to take care of are all centered around uniqueness. So we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to eliminate the uniqueness or manage the uniqueness in the systems here. So, thought about this one. It's a little bit about what we're just talking about here. This cloud journey or virtualization journey. Typically what happens, we start off with, so IT production, that's code for test and dev, right? It's your stuff. It's not really customer stuff. It's a safe place to start work. And so that's where virtualization comes in. This is what's the thing that gets worn out all the time? This is the low-hanging fruit, right? This is well, if it doesn't go well, we didn't show it to anybody, so we've got a chance to regroup before we actually show it to somebody. How many of you hear people say, that's okay, we'll come back? And how often do you actually come back? It never happens. Or it so rarely happens that it shouldn't be a policy, right? Well, that'll be good enough, we'll come back. So this is that environment where we'll come back has a chance, right? Because you don't have to go through an elaborate notification that we're taking down something. We might get the opportunity just to do it. Then we work on the business production. So at this point, the idea is we worked it out. We did this iterative thing in our non-production environment, went into production. And now we've got customers, we've got environments, you all have environments that are virtualized to the point where you're now looking at trying to optimize the virtualization. I mean, the virtualization was a good benefit because we got consolidation. We, whether you see it or not, you had the opportunity to reduce costs around hardware. You got opportunity to reduce costs around cooling and power. Maybe you got the opportunity to have additional capacity that you couldn't have had otherwise. Walk into a server room, walk into a data center, and we see literally there's blank space, and you ask them about it, and it's because they've run out of power. They got lots of, square footage, but they don't have the power to drive it. So we can do some consolidation, we can increase that. So now we're looking at trying to optimize what's up there. This is also one of those opportunities where people figured out, well, we've got the same 5 guys that we had when we had 50 servers. Now we've got 5 guys, and we've got, let's be generous, or let's be easy, more than 50 servers, maybe a lot more than 50 servers, because it's just easy to get them. So now they start to figure out, well, how do we deal with that? How do we take that on? And I'm not really talking about, it's easy enough to spin them up from templates. It's easy enough to make copies of things. This is the issue of, now I got 5 guys working on 50 or more systems, and they get the help ticket, and it says, this service won't start. This application is stopped. And in the process, in the name of good customer service, they go ahead and give themselves a local account on the machine. They go ahead and change something about how that service was configured. And now we have what we thought was in line with a whole bunch of other stuff, and now it's unique. So if we can get to this, this rapid provisioning, the thing that enables that is automation, right? And automation not only lets you have an opportunity to do more work with fewer people, but it gives you an opportunity to keep doing the same exact process over and over again. Okay? We shouldn't have to worry about whether I built it or whether somebody else built it. If we run the automated process, we'll get the same result, right? This is one of the things that sometimes can be frustrating. I know it's frustrating for me to go into places and be able to recognize who built a particular server, right? Might be maybe it's the way you left your calling card, but I think particularly as these things get to scale, having it more consistent is going to make it more secure, better able for compliance and like. We really, we're not looking for snowflakes. We're not trying to find some way to make each one of these things the perfect, masterpiece. This should be probably a lot more in practice, a lot more about configuration and a lot less about customization, right? It's not a whole bunch of one-offs. It should be fairly consistent. All right. So the heading up here is compliance, but you can think of it as consistent operation. You can think of it as making it easier to troubleshoot things and the like later. So change management, compliance. The compliance in this case doesn't necessarily need to be with some industry group. It could be compliance just within your own environment. You have we have a standard. Let's hope we have a standard. Standards? We have a consistent, it's awfully hard to get the end result if we don't know what it looks like when we get started, right? What are we aiming for here? So what should it look like when we're done? So if we agree on what it should look like when we're done, it's a lot easier to have 2 or 3 guys go out and actually come up with that. If it's just a matter of, well, we need one of these and we don't quite know what it looks like, you're going to have a much harder time trying to maintain it, secure it, So make sure we've got a good standard. Then change happens. Now, it's unavoidable, right? The change happened because you have a policy that says the password's going to expire, right? Password's going to expire on a user's account. Password may expire on a service account. Some other, we're going to be patching our systems. So change isn't always bad. We just have to make sure we're keeping on top of the change. So we've got planned changes. Those are the ones that hopefully we had a meeting about. We've got a procedure that we go through on this. We know how we do it. And then we've got the unplanned change. Probably the unplanned change is where we've got more things. If we're looking for ways to exploit things, or if we're looking for the things that are going to cause us problem, it's the unplanned changes. So, user changes, unapproved admin changes, that's it was just simpler. I just gave myself an admin account on the box, or I wasn't in the root group before, but I am now because I knew the root password and it was just easier because the rules say I need to log in as myself, right? So I just made myself a root user, so I don't have to use root anymore. I'll just log in as me. So those kinds of things. Exploits, right? We'll let other people talk about the exploits, but certainly those get reflected as changes, and if we've got a really good environment where we can monitor and where we can go back and verify these things against baselines, we should be able to see some of these changes, the result exploits. And then shadow IT. This is the most fun run. This is it's not even in the data center maybe. This is the server running on a workstation underneath somebody's desk that has weaseled its way into production. And so we just deal with it. All right, so as we're going through this, we've got our deployed standard. We go through plan changes. That should give us, we should stay in compliance when we do the plan changes. At least we're compliant with our own process and the like. We know this patch needed to be applied. We've tested it. We've verified that it's going to be acceptable, and we applied it. So we certainly have changed from the original gold standard, but it's an accepted change. So we're still in compliance, whether it's with ourselves or with somebody else. So unplanned change, no matter how good-hearted it is, no matter how customer service oriented it is, we've now drifted, right? We now have at least one box that's not consistent with the standard. Okay, and unfortunately, it's probably not just one box that's inconsistent. And then even more fun, they're probably not even inconsistent in the same way, right? Same guy may have gone through and worked and touched all of them, but he might have done something unique to each one of them because they all called for something different, right? Just trying to do troubleshooting, just trying to react to what's going on. So we've got that. So we need to be able to capture the changes, so we'll give you an idea on that. Then are we still compliant? If we're not compliant, then we need to remediate. Now, that could just be as simple as reapply a script, reapply, go back through, scrub out the changes, remove the local accounts, do whatever it was. If it's determined that it should be incorporated, well, then we go ahead and we incorporate it into the standard, and now we've got other machines to remediate, right? This one was different than the rest, and we've decided that should be the standard, so we get more work to do. And ultimately, we should end up back at a compliant state. Sound good? Right? This is what we're all aiming for, right? So additionally, these are other kinds of changes as well. Patch management, software provisioning, right? This is the change. We want to be able to manage this change. So if we've got consistent packaging, we've got consistent deployment processes, we've got inventory, then we'll stay within our process. And then day-to-day vulnerability checks, and that's probably going to be outside of what really I'm going to talk about here. That's going to be, monitoring, right? We're looking for known vulnerabilities. Maybe we're looking for how do we find an unknown vulnerability? Probably the best chance you've got for finding an unknown vulnerability is just looking for change, right? We find change, we find an unexpected change. That might be the first sign that there's you've got something. So probably we should have gotten right to this one. Here's our standard build, right? We got an approved change, we apply the patches, we get to a new standard, we keep right on going. If we don't, we've got to somehow reconcile these. Now, configuration management, whether it's the VMware product or whether it's a Microsoft product or a CA product or the like, the idea of having a system in place to actually inventory the environment, track the changes, keep track of things, whether it's done based on logging, whether it's done based on capturing events. As far as the purpose we're going through here, we're talking about something like that. Now, I've got 10 steps that we're going to go through this, and some of it are just the things I mentioned already. So the first one, figure out what you got. I mean, really, truly, honestly, figure out what you got. How do we find the servers under people's desks? How do we do that? So if, employ a system that's going to allow you to do this inventory. The configuration management systems, the asset management systems, asset inventory systems, they do a real good job of being able to discover what's out on the environment. And probably, if you want the most fun, you can use Nmap. Most of them have a way that they've either put Nmap in under the covers. They didn't tell you it was Nmap, but if you went and dug, they'll find it, right? If we've got a way, if it's on the wire, if it's a way for us to get there, we'll find it. Okay. Now, once we've got that inventory, now we've got a little bit of homework. Let's go look for the things that, do we understand what all's here, right? That might be the first revelations. We got a whole bunch of systems. We found that shadow IT stuff. We've got systems here that we weren't even thinking about. Somebody's reported in a meeting, oh yeah, all of our database servers, they're all patched. They're all up to this standard. And then you found a whole bunch of SQL Express running on people's desktops doing things, and now all of a sudden you don't have it, right? So identify what's out there. So discover what we got. We don't really have a chance of being compliant or being. I'm trying not to use the word secure, but we probably ought to say secure a lot this week or today. We don't have a chance if we don't know what all systems are out there, right? So next up, most of us have policies that say we use a centralized account repository, whether it's Active Directory or whether it's eDirectory or some LDAP or something like that. We most likely have a policy that says we use a centralized account repository. We don't rely on local accounts on all of our systems. But I very routinely, as we're rolling out systems for customers, see a lot of use of local accounts, right? And it has to do with well, we just got this system up and running. We haven't got the fire rules to allow us to talk to Active Directory yet. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a local account. We're going to go ahead and install this software, and we're going to have it use that local account, and it'll be just fine, because we're going to what? We're going to come back later and fix it. So we end up with these local accounts. Now, local accounts in themselves, maybe that's not such a big deal. The problem is they're going to outnumber you, right? All these systems with local accounts, and even if they all had one local account, that'd probably be more manageable, but you're outnumbered, right? So we want to be able to keep a track of what's going on there. So again, the VMware product certainly can do this. Microsoft, CA, they all have products that can do this. We can find those local accounts, and then we can go back and replace them, remove them, disable them, whatever we need to do in there, or adopt them and apply our standard policies to them. Make those passwords age. Make those passwords meet our complexity requirements, whatever it happens to be, right? So next, local accounts, local groups. So I give you the example I gave you there with the root group. We're probably not going to get rid of the root group on a machine that has the root group, but we certainly can manage who's in that group, who gets to use those permissions, or whatever local groups we got in there. So sort of the same thing's going on here. Identify them, see who's the members of them, verify that fits your policies, and if it doesn't, then we need to remediate it. We need to go ahead and make the changes to it. Whether that's removing the group, removing the members, changing the permissions, whatever it is about that group, we want to go ahead and get that under control. Service accounts. Now, these are probably local accounts. Well, let me put that. If these turn out to be local accounts, they're less likely we're going to remove them, right? And if we discovered them after the fact, these are probably now at the point where we got to reconfigure applications, which is simple enough to do, right? If we're supposed to use a centralized account for it, substitute a centralized account for it, go reconfigure the service, move on, get rid of the local account. If the mandate is you use a local account because it's an environment that we don't want to have connected back to our main directory service, then again, get it under administration. Make sure it meets with the policies. Make sure we've got it configured. I find myself a lot of times recommending to customers that we create service accounts, not just let things run as the local system, not just let things run as the local network authority. And so many times I get customers going, why? It's just so easy. All I have to do is just leave that checkbox and just move right on, and it'll work, and it can do anything. It's like, well, it doesn't need to do anything. It's supposed to be an FTP server. It's not supposed to be able to change the permissions on the computer accounts. It's not supposed to be able to create new users. So anyway, in that case, I might be saying, think about those service accounts. Make sure that we're only giving the accounts the appropriate permissions. And that means you have homework, right? If you're going to install an application and you're not going to just use the local system, then you have to figure out what's supposed to happen with that account. Good news is, at least in the virtualization space, an awful lot of the vendors, they can work with you on this. I know I personally have worked with Trend Micro on specific permissions for their deep security product. We worked with others. They're more than willing to work with you on this. If you've got, honestly, they're waiting for people to have some interest in doing this, and if you can work with them a little bit, they're more than happy to pare that down from just make it the local administrator to, all right, it needs to have these specific privileges. And that privilege is not just on the local machine, those are privileges maybe even inside the application we're trying to run it as. Okay, so modify the service accounts, run them under a different account. Don't just as a knee-jerk use the local system. It's simple, it's easy, it probably will work, but we're going to leave behind something we didn't intend to. All right, now share permissions. This is one of those things where it gets out of hand really in a hurry, particularly if we've got a lot of machines that have shares. And this is back to that inventory. We might find a lot of machines have directories that have been exported, things that have been shared. Again, just because it was simple, right? We needed to install some patches. We were having a hard time getting a connection to something, so we just copied them up to some place. And we went ahead and shared that directory. And the intention, of course, was we would go back, right, and turn it off. And so what we got left with is, well, if we're doing it in a hurry, what kind of permissions do you think we're going to do? Right, this is, we'll let root, the group, and everybody have full control. This is everybody full control, because that's the simplest thing to do, because we just need to have it up. We just need to, come on. I got to install this patch. I got to make this change. I got to get that software over there. And then we don't go back after it. So there are plenty of utilities, again, that can come out and enumerate all these shares in your environment. And then we can go back and verify the permissions that are applied to those shares. Again, is it appropriate? Is it not? If it's not appropriate, then we need to remediate it. Okay? How are we doing? It's a bunch of homework, right? I told you that's where it's going. All right, next up, control the services. Services, start the services that should be running, configure the ones that shouldn't be running, to be disabled, of course, manual, maybe. How many of you actually need the Bluetooth service on your servers? How many of you need the Windows Wireless 0 configuration on your servers? It's on some of your servers. And it may not seem like any big deal, but somebody is figuring out how to exploit the fact that we can get some kind of networking going that we didn't think we could otherwise, or we'll exploit that for something else. So take a look at the services. Now, I come at this from a virtualization standpoint as well. If we've got a bunch of unnecessary services, unneeded services, then we're also consuming resources, right? And this is one of those issues that's maybe exacerbated by virtualization. The idea that we have to share resources. As soon as we've got more than one operating system on that piece of hardware, we have to have some way to make sure that we're sharing the resources appropriately. And if we're just wasting them, we might be getting a double whammy here. We might have a service enabled that's borderline dangerous for us, right? There's a way to exploit it that's not even that exotic, and we might be wasting resources because we've got something taking, CPU cycles and memory from a virtual machine that doesn't really gain any benefit from it. So whether you want to look at that as trying to be efficient as far as use resources or better with security or compliance, go find them, go turn them off. Or, if we're in a Windows environment, this can be done with group policies. This can be done with any number of tools to go through and verify this stuff. All right, similar things go through with Linux and the like. We're looking for daemons that we don't need to have running. We're looking for other processes that we don't need to have configured. Okay, stop the unsafe services, of course. Rogue registry entries. So this one's very Windows specific, but again, this happens. This happens in that we're just trying to get this thing running. And hey, we found this thing, and it looked like if we just added a new registry key here, it'll make this unsupported, undocumented feature turn on. I'm thinking, we've done this. We've done it in production. Was doing a rollout with some virtual desktops, and we had an issue where the left shift key didn't work in a certain situation. The right shift key would work, but if you dug deep enough, we could figure out that if you added a new registry setting that basically said to substitute the right one for the left one or the left one for the right one, now they both worked. But the problem here is if we fix that as a one-off for somebody, this is more about compliance, less about security, right? why would we want to go fix that again and again and again? If we figured out what's there, we should adopt that into our standard and go forward with it. Might not be a great example of a rogue one, but if it's the kind of thing, that one you may not see as an unsafe entry, but it's an example of, people find these workarounds, and if those workarounds get implemented just in the little one-offs, then sometimes we introduce vulnerabilities, other times we're just making these things more unique, right? And even if our concern is not security, if our concern here is just trying to have sane operation, we don't want these things to be unique, right? We really want these things to be consistent. How frustrating it is when you assume it's going to work because the last one you touched worked and this one doesn't. And they get built from the same image, they get built at the same time. The problem was the last guy that touched them was different. And so now we got a whole other thing. So we want to keep, in all these things, we're trying to drive out the uniqueness where it's not required. Okay. Remove unapproved software. Gotta love this one. I don't know if you can read that. Loft crack 6. How's that get on there? I didn't know there was either. But at the risk of telling stories that I think the statute of limitations have all passed, we get crazy requests by customers. All right, so here's the deal. I promised the executives that we'll be able to migrate all the email from this to that, and they'll not be disrupted at all. We won't make them do anything other than just log in, and it'll be just like it was before. Okay. I'm thinking of a specific instance where it was a migration from GroupWise on eDirectory to Exchange on Active Directory. So there's no way that your eDirectory username and password is going to get you into Exchange. If we retired all the eDirectory stuff and switched it all over to Active Directory and Exchange. So I know in this particular situation, we went back to the customer and said, we can't do it. He says, oh, I bet you can. What do? We took a bunch of workstations from their business and we ran Loftcrack on them. This was back a ways. Yeah, and we cracked every password on them so that we could reconfigure them as the person so that when they walked in the next day or over the weekend, it was all different, but they could just log in as Bob with the username of Flash and they're ready to go. And their password's there, everything's set up. So I don't think we left it on the systems. But, as crazy it may seem, somebody might sit there and go, well, of course it's there. And they'll almost give you you told me to put it there, right? It was a password recovery tool. They lost their password and they were in the executive office and they weren't about to change it because, my gosh, they got that same thing for their bank account, for their pension, everything. You can't mess them up. They got a system working here. So find that unapproved software, I don't install. So that's back to that inventory, right? We not only inventoried all the physical systems, we went back and through and we inventoried the software. Again, a number of tools, lots of them free, to go out there and enumerate all the software on individual systems or on groups of systems. Okay. Then once you present it with that list, then it's time to go through and start weeding them out. Get rid of them, turn them off, shut them off. Maybe we come back and we actually redeploy them with the standard. Maybe we come back and we reapply a policy to it. Okay. Directory file settings. So this is the cousin of the file shares. Right now, maybe we didn't do it on the share, but we did it just for individual files. Right. We can do some cool things if we change the permissions on some files. And cool may not always be what the compliance and security people would think would be cool for us to do with them. All right. So again, make sure we've got if we've got sensitive files. Again, there's a number of utilities we can go out there and we can verify the integrity of these files. We can run a hash against them. We can keep these checksum values. We can verify them. Of course, there's automated products out there that'll see if there's been any changes to the files, or there's these ad hoc products. So if you're worried about file integrity, and we probably ought to be, at least in general, we probably ought to be. We probably just assume that it's not worth somebody's time to make changes to some of these things, or we've never run into an issue, so we just kind of let it ride. But those pieces are out there. So again, monitor those, see if we've made changes. Again, permissions again, making sure we're keeping track of those permissions. this is the local accounts plus the shares, plus we're trying to do troubleshooting, plus the files we might end up with. Well, here was the problem. You couldn't install that software because you didn't have the full control permission to the specific directory where it needed to put that file. So we just did that. Or here's the deal. We just turned off user access control because, man, that's a pain. And so we'll just take care of that stuff. So again, all these things come back. Patch the vulnerabilities. So how many of you have a policy about patching systems? How many of you have a policy that says it's not just, well, it's the second Tuesday, so we know we got a bunch of work to do, let's get after it. We've got a policy that actually says we take those patches, we run them through some kind of at least minimal testing before we deploy them, all right? So what's the time interval, the time between when they got released to when they get applied? 2 weeks, month? I know places where, yeah, we test them, and they are 6 months behind. Or they're a quarter behind, right? So I guess in the balance, the quarter behind isn't so bad as the 6 months behind, but a lot of times when the patch announcements come out, that also starts, this is blood in the water. There's now people that go, oh, they just told me it'll do that. Let's go see how we can do that, or let's incorporate that into our tool. I wasn't the guy that found that exploit, but I certainly am the guy that's going to exploit that exploit. So now that I know that's out there, we'll have to add it to our catalog of interesting things we can do. So make sure that you're adhering to these, right? That you have a policy to keep the systems consistent, keep them patched, and then actually do the testing, and then actually apply them, and then go back and verify, right? It's not just good enough to say, oh yeah, I got it, boss. I closed the ticket. They're all patched. Then we go back and we scan them again. We verify them again. We go make sure that they actually are patched. And again, any number of utilities to look for either specific vulnerabilities or just verify that the patches are in place. Okay. So that's the sort of the 10 steps around. Most of these things are around, we could apply these to operations, right? If we're just careful about operations, we'll have fewer of these unplanned changes, or we'll have fewer of these, idiosyncrasies about all these different systems. But we're probably not going to completely get away from them, so we got to make sure we're vigilant. We're going back, we're reviewing this. So this is going to switch a little bit from here. So if we're trying to keep things consistent, I mentioned, sorry, have scripts for the install, have pre-configured installation. Okay, so again, whatever tools we got there, create the software packages, verify them, test them, make sure that they're going to work the way we intended, make sure, how do we make it so we don't have to worry about changing somebody's file permissions later? Well, we worked it out in the lab. We made sure that it'll work this way. And if nothing else, we might have been able to educate the users for this is how it works. Right? They don't get the, oh, what's this? It doesn't work. I'm trying to do this and it doesn't do this, right? It doesn't do that. You're not supposed to do that. So if we've got an opportunity, we've got that. Patch, of course, we talked about this. And then standard images, and again, I think we've at least, as consistent as we can make this. And if your thought is, so lots of cloud talk, right? One of the things about clouds, maybe one of the things that differentiates your virtual infrastructure from this cloud infrastructure that people are thinking about, whether you aspire to it or not, the automation aspect of it. When we're taking a mindset that's aimed more at being able to let the the consumer do the provisioning, let the consumer request the system for their application, then in order for us to trust that consumer to get the right system, what did we have to do? We had to build it for them. We just captured it ahead of time. It's a set of templates, or it's a specific deployment script that goes along with that. So in order for us to actually get the benefit of the self-service, and I definitely see there's a benefit for IT in self-service. One, it's a way for us to enforce standards, right? If we go with this idea that it's about configuration and not about customization, it's not about building, Mary Jo's SQL server. It's about building a SQL server, right? Or it's not about, that the specifics. If it's about having consistent, now we get to apply and more easily, honestly, they got the menu, they picked it, they get the standard, right? If we took it, as far as we could take it. We don't, whether you see that as good or not, I don't know whether you see it as good customer service or not. I think if we set the stage that it's about proper configuration, it's about function, and it's about that, and it's not about bespoke systems. It's not about, but I want mine to have purple background, and I want to have the little dancing pony when I log in, to be absurd examples, but, those are the kinds of, I want it to be mine. I want to be able to identify it as mine as soon as I turn it on. Yeah, not so much. Okay. All right, now, as far as if you're looking for advice, if you're looking for, guidelines, this alphabet soup up here, right? Every one of these organizations, every one of these specific, requirements or standards, there is somebody out there with a guideline for exactly how you meet this, right? So if you're looking for just general, what would a good secure Windows or Linux or ESX system be? We can go look at NIST, National Institute for Standards and Technologies. They have recommendations there. The DISA, what's that? The Defense Information Security Agency. They definitely have these implementation guides. Go find the STIGs. They will tell you exactly how they would have it hardened. Okay. There's any number of people that have SOX compliance information. So where we're going is there's guidelines for this. There are also systems for automatically applying those guidelines, right? Some of them are kind of an ad hoc thing. You can get a compliance checker for different standards, run it against your systems. It'll give you a little report card, right? Here's what we found. These things were in compliance, these things weren't. Now, if it's part of a bigger, more automated configuration management system, then maybe we're just importing these templates into that, and we can have a scheduled operation to verify that we're keeping within those guidelines. Okay, so again, if you're thinking that it's too much to go find those standards for yourself, go use the, it's not even up there, CIS, what is it, Center for Information Security. They definitely have hardening guidelines for all kinds of operating systems, applications, and the like. Where are we on time? It's time? That's probably a good place to stop then. All right, so again, hopefully it felt a lot like somebody was giving you homework, because we all have that homework. I hope it's useful. I hope it's, I was going to say enjoyable, probably not. I felt like I was wagging my finger a lot. Thanks